All right, I'm gonna. No, I don't want that running. All right, I'm gonna admit all. All right, so now we'll see what happens. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Uh, okay, it is 6 o'clock, and we need to get going. I need to forewarn you that my main computer doesn't seem to want to put the video up, so I'm going off my laptop. So I may be looking away like this quite frequently. I apologize for that, but hopefully you'll still be able to see everything on the screen. So everything's working okay. Um, also, John White, would you mind monitoring the chat box tonight? The two that normally do it don't, and I know you're pretty talented in that. So,
I got it.
all right, perfect, excellent. Okay, welcome everybody. I can't believe it. This is the halfway mark. We do Zoom number 4 tonight, and we're featuring the 4A boys and girls. But before we get there, a couple of just housekeeping things. Um, John, as we said, is already going to do the chat. I've got the recording going. There's the email address if you need to get in touch with us. And a couple of reminders for meetings. The new officials meetings in the Phoenix area are, we have two left. They're a little bit of ways now, but I think that's the last two that I know of. And in the Tucson area, we have three continuing on with this Tuesday at the Sporting Chance. Um, Also, John is continuing his crew. He's doing his crew of three tomorrow night, 6 o'clock at the AI office. And everybody is invited to that, especially people that are interested in learning the crew of three. Um, the transfer scrimmage is at, whoops, at Brophy. If I can back that up just a tad. On November 13th, 6 o'clock. So if you're a transfer, that would be great for you to check that place out. And with that, I believe that's all the announcements. Um, we'll get right to the video after we do our disclaimer here. As a reminder that it is for the betterment of high school basketball officials, and we're not not trying to embarrass any official, coach, player, or institution. Of course, with the kudos, that's pretty easy to do because um, as the name implies, almost everything is very positive and upbeat and what have you. We do have a couple of learning situations as always, but that's how we'll always look at them. So without further ado, let's get cracking with the video. As I said, we start off with the 4A Girls State Championship game, which features Breck Montoya, Guy Giordano, and James Sims. See what they have for us. We're going to start off with, for those of you that are just joining us and might not be familiar, NCC is no call correct. Those are actually the ones that we like the best because that means that you've done a good job, the game is flowing, and you're not interrupting it needlessly. So this next one's dealing with verticality, and this is where I'm going to probably start turning away. Whoa, why did that? I got to back that up. That wasn't supposed to be that quick. Gonna be one of those nights. Okay, so I stop it here on purpose. I don't know what happened to the training point, the teaching point. As we can see, our defender has obtained legal guarding position. Once the player is coming in, there will be some contact, but that contact had no effect on that defender's ability to continue to play. And as a result, it was a good no call correct and let the play go on. Now, this next one is a little bit different than what we do sometimes. It's dealing with position and coverage of all three officials. Maybe you can say it's a little bit of a preview of what John's going to cover tomorrow night. We're going to take a look at all three officials and their positioning and what they're looking for. Oh, I see. Okay, there's the rest of it. I see what happened. We're back at the verticality one. We got a few gremlins working tonight. All right, I'm going to back that up. Oh, I hope I got. Oh, okay. All right, here are the teaching points. Starting off with the crew hustling up the court, maintaining the open view in all cases. We can see our leads looking over his inside shoulder, and he's got the front line. Center guy has got the middle pack here. He's got the open view, so he's got everything on the backside. And Breck is bringing up the trail end in fast fashion. So let's look at the positions. Our leads got good depth off the end line. That obviously is that's important even in a crew of two. Our center is that free throw line extended, and our trail is at the 25. ISP stands for initial starting position. That's a tough one because depending on where the players are, that varies, and it varies between 25 and the 28-foot mark, depending. And sometimes you may even have to go out even further if the players go out there. But in this case, we've got them all boxed in a nice, fine fashion. Okay, so here we're going to focus on our trail. Our trail has a chance to go under. Remember, that's what we advocate if at all possible. Once in a while, you do have to come out on the court. We've got one of those coming up a little bit later on. But in this case, Breck does a nice job of getting under the play to get the open view. The ball, now this is what's really good. The ball comes back to him, and you can see right now he's at a straight line position, but he's not going to accept that. He gets this open view that we advocate up here in the left-hand corner, and he's going to position adjust, have a sense of urgency, and you can see it's not a major change, but he just took a couple of steps down and was able to cover it. In the meantime, now that the ball has crossed the basket line, that's obviously over in our center area, and you can see the head of our lead. He is looking off ball, good discipline, good eye discipline, and so is our trail. They're not watching ball. Okay, our center is resisting getting straight lined here, just like we saw with Breck over there. He's going to move just slightly to maintain that open view. And at the same time, our lead up here is closing down, thinking about getting ready to initiate the rotation. So our lead rotates, our center is going to move to the trail position, and our trail closes down. Well done. And John will definitely reinforce that tomorrow night. All right, next kudo. What did I miss here? All right, another no call correct. This is going to be a situation where some people might call a hell ball on this. Our crew is going to go with Steele, and I think they do a good job of making the correct decision. Take a look, see what you think. Notice how Guy is closing down towards the end line for rebounding coverage. And here come the teaching points. I already talked about that. So you can see the hand was on top of the ball, but the key thing here is that and I put basically the wording of the language for a hell ball. Remember, that's one where the ball is gripped by two opposing players so much that neither one can gain control without being necessarily unrough. As you can see here, there was a temporary pressure on the ball, but the player was able to pull the ball away without any undue roughness. So I think the crew did a nice job here of not calling a hell ball. Sometimes I think we see that, but they resisted doing that here. All right, number five. This is a this is a real interesting one, and actually, it's coup 5 and 6. We have two correct travel calls within a 10-second span. We're going to have one down here on the left, and then we're going to have one goes back on the right. Let's take a look. So our player ends the dribble with her left foot. I should say, yeah, her left foot becomes the pivot foot as she's going to step with that right foot. She's going to take a couple of steps with that right foot, and then she gets a little bit off balance. And to maintain her balance, she picks up that left foot, puts it back down on the floor, and Breck was jolly on the spot and recognized that that obviously is a travel. Okay, and this is from the opposite angle on the other side of the court. I'm going to play that back one more time. You can see left foot steps, travel. All right, the second one, 10 seconds later down the other end. This is that split step travel. Happens really quick. You've got to really, really focused to pick this up. Okay, what happened on that one? You can see she shuffled her feet, and that was the travel. Now, hmm, um, okay, that's a preview of coming attractions. As I said, the gremlins are in full force tonight. Okay, this one we have a situation where we have a good, closely guarded situation on a dribble. Remember in Arizona, we still using the dribble closely guarded. That's one of the reasons why I picked this. You may say, well, what's the big deal? This is a routine closely guarded. It's primarily picked as a reminder that we have not taken the option that some states are doing, and that is not having closely guarded on the dribble. We still have it, and Mr. Sims here is going to provide a good example of that for us. As you can see, the closely guarded situations at 4:21 on the shot on the game clock. He's got a good steady count going. Stops the clock, and as you can see, he didn't rush it. He made sure that he had five, because sometimes we have a tendency when we get close that we may speed it up. He didn't do that. If anything, he definitely gave them the benefit of the doubt. All right, number seven, correct call for an illegal screen. It's a little jumpy, but so as you can see, the screener actually got her leg out and her shoulder, and James did a nice job stopping the clock, giving the behind the head signal and not using the fist. Number eight, number eight, contact on the ball handler. This is a biggie this year. Little comment before. Again, this one was selected, and you may say, well, this is pretty basic. It is pretty basic, but sometimes we see this get not called. And the reason and that's one of the reasons why that this is a point of emphasis this year. And it's a point of emphasis because what the Rules Committee came out with in their rationale was that they were saying, players are doing a pretty good job with getting their hands up. And this is an example of that. The white jersey player does a good job of keeping her hands pretty much off the ball handler, but she gives a little bit of a hip bump. And that hip bump sometimes is enough just to obviously affect rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness. And as a result, we've got to do a better job of calling that because it obviously is putting that ball handler at a disadvantage. And that's why this is featured. So here comes the hip bump. Not much of one, but it's just enough to slow her up, and it also force her to change her direction. And that's another situation, obviously, if the direction has to be changed. And this is the one where you actually had a preview of coming attractions. It's another situation where it's a little bit of a bump. It's not much, but just enough of a bump to make her go out of bounds. We can't really see that. Obviously, Guy has got a good angle on this, and he could see that. Let's not penalize the offensive player for stepping up because the bump affected the rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness of the player. And I kind of like this one. I'm going to let it go here because it's kind of interesting. The player, you can say, you can kind of like saying, well, oh, what, me? Who, me? She looks at the people in the front row. So that pretty much does that with the, let me back this up. And I'm going to check in with John White. Anything in the chat box? Anything we need to address?
Nothing so far, Jeff.
Okay, great. All right, onward then. Boys 4A, Pat Miller, Rich Estabrook, and Rusty Taylor. And I must say, I'm gonna start things off here. I think we've done this for 3 or 4 years now, and I think these guys just broke the record for the number of kudos. I usually feature about 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that neighborhood. There's going to be more in this one, partly because it goes into overtime. And there were several key kudo items in the overtime. So let's take a look at some real good stuff here. And there's going to be a couple of learning situations as well. All right, kudo number one is a good example of um, continued rotation at the end of the quarter. The reason why I selected this is because this was a question that came up last week, I should say 2 weeks ago in our last session. And somebody asked the question in regard to some states lock down. What that means is that they don't rotate. Usually it's under 30 seconds. And in Arizona, we continue to rotate right to the very end. And the reason of that is kind of shown in this. It's not a glaring situation in this case, but I think it serves as an example of why we continue to rotate. Let's take a look. So to start off with, if you can kind of divide your eyes and kind of watch all three officials, it's almost like they're tied together and they move pretty much in unison. So, before we start, we can see what's happened is that our lead has already initiated the rotation, and he's basically pulling our trail. I'm sorry, yeah, our trail down to the center position, and our center has backed out. And in this case, our center did back out deeper than what we normally see, but he had to do that because the players were out there initially.
Jeff, can I make a comment there?
Yeah.
On that play, that's an example of that original C position official does not have to wait and see his partner at the lead moving over. If that ball is out in that area and he feels a need, he can initiate a rotation as the C. Right there is perfect. He sees this, he can go out there without he got his back to the lead official. He could move out there even if the lead didn't go, and then the other two can follow that. So
Very good. All right. So as a result, now, and this is the reason behind why we continue to rotate. Stop and think. As a result of this rotation, we have dual coverage on the ball side, and that happens to be the side that they're attacking. If we had stayed locked down, we would not have had Rich down here in the lead position having that look through angle that he's got. He would have been over here if we had locked down. And if he'd been over here, he probably would have been screened out. Now, I realize it changes every time because we can't predict where players are going to go. But we're playing the odds, And the reason is because the feeling is we want to get the best coverage possible. And I know sometimes the comeback is that, well, people might get confused. Well, remember, the official opposite the table is responsible for the last second shot. In fact, well, I think I've got that in here. No, I guess I don't. But I want to back that up. So right now, as the rotation begins, our trail here, Pat, he knows he's responsible for the last second shot, and he has no problem that the rotation is going to take him down into the center spot. He's still going to be responsible for the last second shot, but he's going to be in better position as that play develops. Instead of staying out as the trail, as you can see, he does a nice job, does a jog down in, and as they attack that far side, he's got that look through angle much better than he would have had if he'd stayed out in the trail position. So that's the rationale behind what we do. We'll go through the teaching points one time and I'll be quiet. Now, one suggestion, however, on that, you may have noticed it was kind of quick. Right here, we would suggest uh, uh, I want to stop on this. So the point I was trying to make is we do recommend as that play went below the free throw line extended, you notice that our trail did back up a little bit and is really, really deep here in regard to responsibility. So the suggestion would be here to close down to that, about that 25-foot area so that we've got good rebounding coverage there as well. But by and large, this is a great example of the last second shot situation. All right, let's move on. Number two, another situation of eye discipline off ball. We talked about this at the last section as well. Again, for new folks, this is advanced, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to a crew of three. Even though this is a crew of three, there's the concept sometimes that you do have to come out of your primary coverage area if you don't have a competitive matchup in your primary coverage area. And this is a good example of it. And you've got to have eye discipline, not be watching the ball. And we have a good example right here of what we're talking about. So try to put a thought bubble here. Our center official, Rich, should be thinking, I'm assuming he is because it looks like it. I have no competitive matchup where am I needed? And if you notice this red area here, that's the centers. That's his primary coverage area. He's got two players in there. I might say three, but none of these are competitive matchups. As a result of this, he does an excellent job of going off ball because our trail has to be on ball because it's in his primary coverage area. So Rich has done a good job. Where am I needed? And the answer is right up here where we have a potential holding situation. And our lead should be thinking that as well, because as you can see, he doesn't really have a competitive matchup either. So we get back to live action. And as a result of his eye discipline and not being a ball watcher, he now is able to see this big time hold right here. And if he had been a ball watcher, he would have been looking out over here and probably would have missed that. Something that's really obvious, but he didn't. Nice job. And he makes the ruling. All right. Kudo number 3, a correct call for a blocking foul. This was not easy. And before we get to the teaching points, I have to make a confession. At first, when I saw this play, I picked it as a learning situation because I thought it was a player control foul. I thought he extended his arm. But after running it back several times, it became obvious that no, this is a kudo because it does a good job of demonstrating whether or not a defender has obtained legal guarding position. And that's what we're going to try to focus on when we get to these teaching points. So, if you remember, we tried to talk about running a checklist in our head. And if the three items are checked off, then we have a player control foul. However, as we can see here in this stop action, black number 4 has not got hit 2 feet facing this when contact occurs. So here's the contact. He does not have 2 feet facing. So we go up to our checkbox over here and we can't not check off. And if we don't have all 3 checked, then we've got to go with a blocking foul. And that's exactly what Rich does. Fine job. And he gave the correct blocking signal. All right, kudo number 4, proper throw-in technique. Now, this may seem minor, and some people may say this is not kudo worthy. It's kudo worthy in the sense that it's very important for our new officials that are on this call or that are watching it on YouTube that they understand that in Arizona, we have or actually it's an Arizona absolute, that any throw in on the 2 sidelines or on the backcourt end line, we prefer to see a bounce pass. And it's surprising how many times we don't. And this clip, even though it's not a major play, does show the potential as to why we advocate for this distance. So as you can see, Rich has got good distance here. He doesn't make the bounce pass, 3 feet away where he could actually hand it off. We sometimes see that. People say, well, I'm supposed to give a bounce pass, so they stand right beside him and they bounce it. That's not the point. That's not what we're saying. We're saying you need to get the distance for the reason coming up here when we get back to live action. As you can see, a lot of times they will move quickly backwards. If Rich had stayed here, he would have been in this unfavorable straight line position shown by the red arrow. He couldn't see what this defender was doing. He couldn't see if he grabbed his shirt. He couldn't see if he reached and hit his arm. He couldn't tell. But by being back with that bounce pass, he automatically has the open view. And he's got the look between. So that's the reason for that. Number 5, actually 2 things, and one's a kudo dealing with sliding on the floor, no call correct. And there's a learning situation in this one. And NCI is no call incorrect. All right, here's the kudo part. The no call correct. Just as a review, traveling rule situation when momentum causes a player that has the control of the ball to slide, and they actually can be rolling over as their momentum and as they're sliding. That is not a travel that is legal. And our crew here does a good job of not ruling that as a travel. And then when we go back to live action, though, we have a learning situation. Loose ball. Remember, for lack of a better term, I know that's not a rule term, but when a player dives on a player that's on the floor, rules still apply. And I've had people ask me, okay, well, what rule? Basically, believe it or not, it's the verticality rule. And the reason for that is because they're on the floor and they still have a vertical space all the way to the ceiling. They have a right to get up off the floor. Well, with this white jersey player diving on top of them, that obviously takes away their right to their vertical space. So in essence, people ask me, so what should the call be? It's a blocking call because they have blocked the ability for that player to rise up off the floor. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Kudo number 6. This is an excellent example of an intentional foul that's not called an intentional foul at first, but a member of the crew has seized the play and thinks it does rise to the next level of not being a common foul and does an excellent job of providing information. And this is a big time kudo. Couple of angles. All right. So a couple of things to refresh in our mind. First of all, what elements are there in an intentional foul? And basically, in this case, I think there are two. And that would be that a player contacts an opponent without making a legitimate attempt on the ball or the opponent. I mean, the guy just reaches over his shoulder and then just throws him to the floor. And secondly, it certainly was excessive during a live ball, and therefore I think it rises to the status of being intentional. And evidently, so does Pat, because as we can see, oh, actually, before we do that, there's another part here. If you notice, I hope I didn't go too far. No, I want to go back because this this from a different angle. Watch. I hope you notice what Rich did. As you can see down here at the bottom, the coach, he's a little antsy. He obviously wants it raised, and he comes out on the floor. Amazingly, in my opinion, Rich has cool-headedness so that not only does he listen to his partner talking about elevating the type of foul, he also is dealing with the behavior of the coach. And he puts the stop signs out. No, we got it. We got it. We'll get to you. That's really, really good, thorough coverage here in regards to dealing with the coach. And remember, that's a point of emphasis this year as well, is how to deal with coach. And I think this is an example of that in this particular situation, which is, in my opinion, again, is very, very difficult. So, as we get back to the decision, you can see that he does take the advice of his partner and does, because he's the calling official, and as the calling official, it's up to him to take the information that's provided by his partner. And in this case, he was convinced that it should be elevated, and he does so. And the other good thing is, note that the partner that gave the information that obviously changed his mind, he's going to go and he's going to back the coach up, and he is going to explain what he told. I'm assuming again, but it was handled so well. I think it's a safe assumption that he explains what he told Rich, and from the coach's reaction, obviously he's not going to argue with it because it's to his favor.
Hey, Jeff, can you back that up for just 1 second, too? Because I think we should point out one other thing, and that's what Rusty is doing during that.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, you want to deal with that?
Yeah, if you want to back it up to where the two other officials were talking up top. Okay, right there. This is a great point too. We had two officials, one coming in to correct a call from Rich, and then you've got the third official, Rusty. It's very important what you see, what he's doing. He's got his eyeballs on all 10 players because he's got his two partners dealing with something else. This is when stuff can get out of hand. So kudos to Rusty for staying back and keeping an eye on all 10.
That's a great point. Thank you, John. That's excellent. That's why we're paying you the big bucks. And you can see Rusty here. He's still from this angle. Same thing. Good. All right. Now, this next one is an interesting one. And thankfully, we haven't had too many of these. And I don't think I haven't featured one yet. And this is the first one that I've actually had a chance to see a blood situation. Now, I will admit that this does seem a little bit unorganized, but having been there and I know how easy that can be, I think this crew does a pretty good job of dealing with the blood, a blood situation. So we'll play it through and then we'll try to break it down as best as we can. Okay, let me back that up just a hair. And again, I apologize for speculating, but I hope that I've speculated correctly, and we'll see what happens. So what's happened is the player has got hit on the lip, and basically our new lead official notices it. What makes this a little bit tricky is that at first it appears, and again, I'm guessing here, but it looks like the somebody on the bench realizes this and they're sending somebody in, they're going to send somebody in right away until somebody someplace, I don't know if it was one of our officials, if it was one of the assistants, but I think somebody realized the new blood rule that they actually have 20 seconds to tend to that player's blood situation. So you can see they pull the substitute back. And as you can see, Pat has gone, and again, I'm guessing, but by his gestures, it looks like I think he's told the table to give me 20 seconds, which is the time span that they're entitled to. Because quickly we see that player is going to jog down to the trainer and be treated. Let's see, where is that? All right. Now, once again, this is very picky, but this is kind of like all of our timeouts. As you can see, here's the player with the blood right here, number one. He hasn't got to the trainer yet. And again, I could be wrong on this. I'm speculating that they've already started the 20 seconds. So the point that I'm trying to make here is don't be in a hurry for this. You know, we're going to allow them to deal with the situation just like a regular timeout. We shouldn't be starting a regular timeout until all the players are off the court and they're to their benches. We should have that same mindset in regard to the player with the blood situation. Wait for him to get down here to the trainer. And once he's down there, then we can say, timeout, please give me 20 seconds. Again, maybe I'm a little bit off on that, and again, the reason why this is the first time I've seen anybody actually ask for time. That's why I like this, because look what happens next. Hope I can stop at the right time. Right here, very typical of a regular timeout, they're giving them a 15-second warning horn. I looked in the rule book quickly, and I couldn't find anything that said anything about the 15-second warning horn for a blood 20-second situation. But I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that's probably a good idea because look what's happened. Because then what's going to happen is Rusty is going to use that to go down and check on the situation. Saying, okay, are they going to be ready within 20 seconds? And as you can see, once he gets there, he gets the word that he's okay. The kid jogs back. I think this is textbook of handling. That's always a tough situation because we don't have it very often. All right, let's go to 8. This one we have a rebounding situation due to displacement, and then we have one of those hook and hold situations. Kind of hard to see. We'll try to point it out in the teaching point section. So if you focus here on black number 25 and notice where white number 1 starts, he starts in the middle of the lane, and you can kind of see that black 25 is getting ready to use his hips and his shoulders, and he's going to push him right out of the lane. And then it's really quick, but right there, he actually had hooked white jersey number 1 arm as well. And our lead official has closed down, got the open view, and makes a good ruling on it. Okay, this next one is not a kudo, but I included it because it's a learning situation. So please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying the crew did anything wrong in this play. It just so happens that I think it serves as a good example of the new goaltending rule that's coming into effect for this upcoming season. So to put the rule up on the screen, when the ball, and bear with me, I'm going to read on this one. When the ball contacts the backboard, it is considered to be on its downward flight. In such a case, it is goaltending when the ball is touched by a player as long as it has a possibility of entering the basket. And I know I've been asked the question, well, what do they mean by it has the possibility of entering the basket? And I hope that will be explained here in this next stoppage of play here. So, as we can see, hopefully, the ball hit the backboard, I think. And then he touches the ball. And it has a chance to score. And by the way, the thinking is if any part of the ball is above the ring, that's the interpretation, that it's considered to have a chance to score. Now, I suppose you could argue that, but that's not what the Federation is putting out as their interpretation. And that came out in their September 28th interpretation as a follow-up to their PowerPoint. So it's hit the backboard, then he hits the ball, and as a result, we have goaltending. Now, I'm going to do a what if because, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble. Because we don't have the greatest angle in the world, I'm not totally convinced that the ball actually hit the backboard first. So my what if is the second new rule, and I didn't put any graphics up on there, but the second new rule might have come into play here. If the ball didn't hit the backboard, I think he slapped the backboard. So just as a review of what we covered at the tip-off meeting, if he slapped the backboard and the backboard vibrated, then now that would be criteria for basket interference. So I don't want to bog things down here, but we've got two things in regard to issues up around the basket this year. So the more we see them, the more we talk about them before the season, the better off we'll be. All right, let's move on. How are we doing for time? Oh, not too bad. Kudo number 11, correct call on a blind screen. And it happened really quick. And I ran out of time in putting up a teaching point on this one, but I'm just going to do it quickly here manually. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, I take that back. As I said, I was pressed for time on these, and so I got my sequence out a little bit. This is another preview of coming attraction. I've got another angle that I sometimes forget that I have, and that's going to come up, I think, in Kudo 14. So let's move on. All right, Kudo number 12, a throw-in violation. Now, I need to set this up. We just had a shot clock violation. So we know that a shot clock violation is a designated spot throw-in. And if you saw real quickly, Rusty did point to the spot indicating that it's a designated spot throw-in. That's a good habit that we need to be in, and Rusty does a good job of doing that. Okay, we designated that spot. Now the onus is up to the player to know what that means. And as we'll get back to live action, I'm not sure what he was thinking, but away he goes. And Rusty is right on top of it and makes the correct ruling. And by the way, I don't know if you can see that, but that's 3 minutes left to go in this game, and it's a 1-point game right now. All right, Kudo 13. Another no call correct on another potential travel. Remember we talked about the sliding situation? Well, we have another potential travel. Very rare. You don't see this. Maybe once every other year, maybe once every 3 or 4 years. So, what's the call? No call. The rule says you may hold the ball on the floor like this as long as your knee or any other part of your body is not on the court. So what's happened here, this white jersey player is very athletic. He is actually pretty strong, obviously. His knees are not going to touch the floor, and he can pick that ball up like he does and let play continue. All right, so here is the blind screen that whoops, I'll let it go. So here's the blind screen that I talked about. And this is a really good angle. So reviewing a screen, remember, this is basically a blind screen. It's set out of the visual field of number 2 here. And if it's outside the visual field, then time and distance come into play. And what happens is based on the speed of the players. So what's going to happen here is we're going to see that basically it's going to be a bang bang, and he really doesn't give him a step. He gives him maybe a half a step right here and picks him right off. Illegal screen. Stop the clock, behind the head, point the direction. Good signal all the way around. All right, another one. Now we're into overtime. And of course, we're going to have our second jump ball. And that means the arrow has to be set. And just because this game was pretty crazy, things are going to get crazy off this jump. So the interesting thing, and we talk about the beginning of the game, are we ready to officiate? Thank goodness this crew was ready to officiate because they were looking for control, they were looking for control, they were looking for control. And the ball's being batted around everywhere. And if you saw quickly, I think it was number 5, pulled the ball into himself real quickly and then is almost tied up. But before it could be tied up, the coach is going to request a timeout. And again, the other reason why kudos go to this crew is because remember, we can't call timeout unless there's player control. And so they obviously were looking for control for arrow purposes. That meant that they had put that in their head. So a timeout could be requested here, and it was correctly granted. Well done all the way around. And the last item I have for tonight is actually a learning situation. Actually, it's a point of emphasis. It just happened in this game. Let me go back here. All right, I think, is this it? Did I miss it? Oh, I got to go back. Okay, point of emphasis this year is to be aware of the delay of game warnings. And if we need to take them, we need to. Now, remember at the tip-off meeting, we talked about, the high fives after a free throw. Even though you may pause for a second or two, that's not what the point of emphasis for. Please, please, please don't misunderstand that and go out of there and issue a delay of game warning for that. This, however, is a situation that was given as an example It's actually happening a lot at the last year, a lot more at the college level. And I'm going to set it up by explaining what happens is when a player actually gets the ball, they don't tap it away. They actually control throw it to the official. Well, look at this. This is a classic example of a delay. So number one, he gets the ball right out of the net, and look what he does. He makes a bounce pass to the official. Right there, that's where we have a delay. And as you can see, this is a fairly sizable delay uh, in perspective, in the right perspective. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'll go to John White first. Thank you, John, for filling in. Any questions in the chat box
Hold on.
that you
Good
feel need
one.
to be addressed?
Each team gets an extra timeout for an overtime period, correct? That is correct.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
That was Mark Lopez asking that question.
Yep.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. We are just under an hour. That is fantastic. And anybody have any questions you want to bring up about anything we covered tonight or anything that has happened since we've last met? Now's the time to speak up. And if not, we'll do our little countdown, going once, going twice. We will be on again next Sunday with 5A, boys and girls. Great week,
Thanks, Jeff.
everybody.
Thanks, Jeff.
Welcome.